Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. It's good to be back in New York. I was in Denver for a few days for Father's Day, visiting my son, and it was beautiful there, but it's good to be back home. Good to see the green grass of home, as they say. Anyway, folks, while we were gone, actually the day I left, the 14th, Attorney John Ray, flamboyant attorney John Ray, who we all know and love, had a press conference. It was a little bit, I would say, a little bit shocking, what was revealed or what he tried to reveal or what he tried to say is the thumbnail. He actually accused, in his press conference, Victoria Heuermann, the 27-year-old daughter of Rex Heuermann and Asa Ellerup, of being involved in the Long Island serial killer murders. And quite improbable, I think, but he raised some really outlandish allegations. In the Long Island press, their headline was Attorney John Ray blasted for claims about Gilgo Beach serial killer suspect Rex Heuermann's daughter. So attorneys for the family of Gilgo Beach serial killer subject Rex Heuermann blasted John Ray, the attorney who has represented families of Gilgo Beach serial killer victims, for implying the suspect's daughter may have been involved. John Ray, a Miller Place-based attorney who represents the family of Shannon Gilbert, the missing woman police were searching for when authorities found the Gilgo victims. He held a news conference Thursday to say that a Tumblr account that appears to be that of Victoria Heuermann shared artists' disturbing images of decapitations, cannibalism, torture, and other graphic pictures, noting that some of the depictions matched how Rex Heuermann's alleged victims were found. It's a very strong inference that this girl was made over the course of years somehow to become accustomed to liking what you see here, Ray told reporters. She certainly falls within the circle of suspicion as to some activity that's involved here. I mean, I think it's really a stretch, if I may be so bold to say that it's a stretch, because what he's presenting is not evidence. It's like an allegation, and he's trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole. And what would we all expect a serial killer's 27-year-old daughter to be like? What do you think she'll be reading? Sports Illustrated? Or do you think she'd be having some sort of macabre ideas of macabre artwork and be involved in maybe some crazy things, right? But to say, based on what you saw, a book inside the house, some postings on her social media, that she now is suspect in the Long Island serial killers. You know, we're going to do an examination of this today, and I have two amazing guests that I'm going to introduce to you right after we play our trailer. But folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your chairs, hold on to your service dog, your wife, your kids, your wig, your toupee, because you're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. You're about to enter the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Without further ado, I'm going to bring these guests on one at a time because I think you're going to be really impressed with who we have on the show today. And first, I'm going to introduce my co-host, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, law degree, all-round nice guy. Let's give a warm welcome to Professor Mike Geary.
Hey, Bill. Good to see you. Welcome back to New York. We're having a heat wave. We're having Florida weather now.
Hey, I can feel it. We brought the Florida weather here too. I don't know if it's a good omen or not, but it got hot, right?
Yeah.
And we also have with us tonight another professor. She happens to be a PhD, Dr. Debbie Goodwin from St. Thomas University in northern Miami. Oh, my God, what a horrible place to live. Dr. Debbie is a criminologist, and it's always good to have her on the show. Dr. Debbie, welcome to the show.
Hello, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, the viewers. I'm always so honored and excited to join you, and I know we'll have a great conversation today. Thank you.
You know, Dr. Debbie, people ask me all the time, our subscribers, our fans, our friends, when are you going to have Dr. Debbie on again? And they don't know the way I work is I call you an hour before the show and I say, what are you doing right now? My God. I don't give you any. I do the same with Mike, but Mike has no life. So, you know, he'll say, nothing. What do you think I'm doing? Nothing. I'll come on. I'll do 4 shows if you need me, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, enough with these pleasantries. Let's get right to it, and let's talk about the press conference. I was a little bit shocked by it, to tell you the truth. And let me just play a little bit of it, and then we'll talk about it. But it's sort of, I don't know. Let's play a little bit, and then we'll talk about it. Let's.
Good morning, everyone. The first thing is I please ask that we're going to make a presentation, and I'll try to speak as loud as I can since we don't have a mic ourselves, and we're live streaming it. So I'll ask that all questions await the end of the presentation. The presentation is going to take a little bit. Not as long as you know you were worried about, but indeed we have some other people here to talk about. With me today, to my right, is Dr. Gary Brucato, who is a clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher, and nationally known author for his work in the areas of violence, including serial killing, especially serial killing, mass murder, and sexual offenses, as well as severe mental illnesses. He's a visiting scholar at Boston College, an expert on the Cold Case Foundation panel. He's worked at Columbia University, the New York State Psychiatric Institute, and he's co-created the Columbia Mass Murder Database, the largest and most definitive study of mass murder ever conducted. He's written nearly 100 articles, peer-reviewed articles, and he's written a well-known book in this field called The New Evil: Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. He co-authored that with another doctor. He's presently working in several forensic training programs.
I want to get right to him showing the photos. So let's go to that right now.
If you look at the full color packet I gave you, there are other pictures in there that are so atrocious we didn't even put them up. Worse than what you see, of people eating human flesh. In this picture, if you look, it has a strange familiarity when you see it, because the torso shows that the arm is chopped off at the elbow. And the head is, of course, disconnected as well. And the body is being cut up into pieces, the hands, and so on. Who does that match? Jessica Taylor? Valerie Mack?
Amazing, right? A stretch, right? I mean, how do you just draw a nexus and put forth this information, put forth these pictures, many of which came from a book that was found inside the Heuermann home, and make that nexus, make that connection that Victoria Heuermann is involved? Dr. Debbie, I'm going to go to you first with that question. How do you make that connection?
You don't, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike. I feel that this is just an unnecessary, unfair allegation. Now, what's intriguing, perhaps, is artwork as it relates to a killer himself or herself. And we could just dial back a little in our history of serial killers, mass murderers. And we do have a prolific serial killer. He is now deceased, by the name of Samuel Little. And for the viewers who recall that case, and just a quick recap, Mr. Little himself drew artwork of his victims. Now, that became a huge issue in the case against him because it was used to identify the victims. So the artwork actually helped investigators. Now, if we look at other serial killers such as John Wayne Gacy and Charles Manson, we could say that they themselves were the artists of, let's call it, creepy artwork, that they themselves made the artwork. And now the correlation, let's say, between a daughter and the father who's the serial killer, I always found it intriguing, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, and our viewers, through the years as a criminologist, how would the relatives interpret all of this? What would be their reactions, and how would it impact them? And so even when we take a look at BTK, Dennis Rader, Bind, Torture, Kill, I remember seeing an interview with his daughter where she was just absolutely mortified and shocked that her father, who she described as a caring, loving, attentive father, those are the words she used, she just couldn't believe it. And then we have Gary Ridgway. Now, his son, Matthew Ridgway, Gary Ridgway, of course, was the Green River Killer. And his son, Matthew, said that his father never missed a beat when it came to any involvement with his school activities, projects, that he too was very attentive, very doting. So to listen to this really, as you say, Sergeant Bill, just shocking allegation and such a far reach here between artwork and the daughter's involvement, I feel is really inappropriate and just invalid.
Dr. Debbie, that was a brilliant little dissertation you just gave. You could almost use that for a new PhD, and I agree with it. Professor Mike, I spoke to you the day of this press conference about this, and we're disturbed by it. We're actually disturbed, but what is the point, Mike?
Billy, when I saw this and I went over it and I took notes and I sent you notes and film clips and things like that, I was disturbed. I wasn't disturbed by the allegations that against Victoria. She's a young girl, and we all go through that period in our lives, in our teens and early 20s, where we're trying to figure out who we are. Am I a goth person? I do my makeup. Do I like this particular music? Do I like this particular narcotic? What are my interests in life? Do I paint? Am I expressive? What kind of music I like? Yeah, there's no harm in that. These are quite normal things. Now, she didn't produce some of these pictures. Some of them were in a book that she was looking at. I thought it was, what I was shocked at was not that, she may have produced some of these pictures, but the fact that someone would say that these pictures show some not unsure connection between her and her father's serial killing. I found it to be irresponsible, and I found it to be derogatory, defamatory. And I was really upset by it because I couldn't believe that someone would actually say this without one scintilla of any sort of vetted, corroborated proof at any level. Phones, eyewitness accounts, DNA, other than one single hair. And we also found a hair. Remember, we found one hair that belonged to one of Rex Heuermann's girlfriends from like the 1990s. So, and people are perfectly fine to dismiss her and say,
Mike, can I stop you one second?
It's really sad.
That actually was his ex-wife, and she's listed
Right,
in that report as witness number 3 because she obviously doesn't want. So I just wanted to correct that because I know there's a million people out there and they're going to say, he was wrong. So I'm going to correct you before they all come with a flood and saying that's his ex-wife, which is witness number 3 identified in the bail report. Okay.
But people are willing to give, witness number 3, an escape from any kind of liability or even an allegation of liability. But yet Mr. A wouldn't do that for Victoria. In fact, in the face of information that we have, phone records and hotel records showing that she wasn't even in New York at the time these things were happening. It is very disturbing. It is headline grabbing, and I think it's irresponsible.
You know, Mike, I 100% agree with you. And one of the things that people keep raising the name of Dr. Gary Bricado, who is at this press conference. I'll put it back on the screen. And the guy is an out and out brilliant man. And I'll put him up here. And I don't know why he lent his expertise and his reputation to go to this press conference, because it wasn't a good look. But Dr. Bricado is a good look. And it's somewhat, you know, I don't want to say it because I really like the guy a lot, could taint your reputation by the folks that you associate with. Because I thought this, again, that this press conference was off in left field somewhere. Let me play a little bit of Dr. Gary Bricado.
And his team and to all of you. And I'll begin my comments by saying that it is important that we dedicate everything we're doing today to the victims. I think it's very important to do that, to remember that we're not interested in the titillating details of what an offender has done as much as trying to prevent those horrible things from happening in the future by understanding these people. I think it's also important to mention that I have not examined Mr. Heuermann, his daughter, his wife, or any other member of the family. And the comments I'm going to make are general about the trends in these kinds of offenders and what we might be able to gauge about someone who may be potentially joining the ranks of that type of individual here. First of all, when people are charged with offenses, repeat murder, you don't get hauled into court, under a charge of serial killing, right? But it is important to understand when there is a pattern of serial killing that is alleged, we can learn a great deal about what the likely motive is of the individual and understand a lot about the individual's psychology. The vast majority of people who meet criteria for serial killing are sexually motivated. And I want you to understand that we have to envision a circle in which there are individuals that repetitively commit sexual assault against other individuals, but don't kill. Within that circle is a smaller group of individuals who are sadistic toward the individuals that they're assaulting, brutalizing them in every imaginable way, but do not kill them. Within that circle is a smaller group that proceed to actually kill the individuals, sometimes to get rid of witnesses, sometimes because the force is too much and someone passes away, and sometimes because this now becomes part of the thrill. But within that circle is the rarest of all, which is a sexually sadistic serial killer who kills after protracted, prolonged torture in every imaginable way. And it is in that tiny circle that we would be placing Mr. Heuermann if he is indeed guilty. It is important to understand that individuals like that are motivated partially by sadism and partially by a kind of intellectual boredom, a stimulation. People of that type, for example, can look at all kinds of things and collect all kinds of things and do all kinds of things to keep it interesting for themselves. And as a consequence, evolve and do all manner of things to their victims to learn about what happens to bodies, to see what causes the greatest thrill. Now, regarding the things that have been spoken about today, it is important to understand that about 80%, it is estimated, of serial killers operate alone. But that leaves, by some estimates, 20% that do operate with other people. That can be a group of people that are all interested in the same perversions. That can be a wife or a partner, significant other. That can be one's own child. In that small circle of cases, which incidentally do not include any in the state of New York that I'm aware of prior to this, where an individual actually has what may be a torture chamber or an isolated place where individuals are brought. For example, you remember from the document reference to hard points. Hard points are those little screws that you hang a variety of tools on, like in a garage. You have to imagine a situation in which a woman would be knocked out and wake up in that kind of chamber with all those instruments around her to be used like a kid in a candy box for sadism and experimentation repetitively. And you have to imagine the potential that that's inside a soundproofed room in one's own home. The rarity of that cannot be emphasized enough. Now, some cases that might be instructive for people to look into. The most important, I think, being the case of David Parker Ray, the sexually sadistic serial killer who had a $100,000 torture chamber soundproofed inside a trailer where women were brought by his own daughter sometimes after she had knocked them out for participation in perversions. Another case you may want to look at is the case of John Wayne Gacy, the sexually sadistic serial killer of boys and young men, because until recently it was thought that he was a lone wolf. And some evidence has emerged more recently that he may have been part of a network that was feeding victims to him. And there are many serial killers of that type, we are learning. There is a tendency to think that these types are lone wolves who can't have relationships with others or engage in crimes with other people. Regarding the things that were spoken about today, as a psychologist, I think it would be important for me to emphasize that we have no clear accusations or proof one way or the other, but there are certainly suggestions that I think must be taken seriously, and there would be precedent for this kind of thing based on other cases. Approximately 1 in 5, according to some experts, of these serial killers do operate that way with other people. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'll also say at the end, I'll also like to take a very quick moment to say that I am a member of the Cold Case Foundation on the expert panel. I'll clarify because I know some people are aware of the name of John Douglas coming up in the bail document as the author of 2 of the books studied allegedly by Heuermann. He is the chairman emeritus of the Cold Case Foundation, which is a group of experts that offers help, assistance to law enforcement, to individuals that petition, families that petition to help solve cold cases. I am sure, given that the average age of onset for people who commit these offenses is about 26, and they don't tend to stop until eliminated or arrested, you can imagine that it would be very improbable that there are only 6 victims in this case. And you can imagine that these individuals would have been kept for some time prior to their killing. I am sure that there are loads of people out there, probably in multiple states, who have encountered this individual, who have potentially escaped this individual, who may have actually been assaulted by the individual or engaged in perverse actions, or may have information on homicides that might in the future be alleged. I would encourage you to please be unafraid to consider prayerfully, thoughtfully reaching out to a group like the Cold Case Foundation, to someone like Mr. Ray, to law enforcement, because when this story is all over, I suspect it will be much more complicated and horrifying than it even appears to be now. Thank you.
Brilliant. The man's brilliant. And that was the class of this press conference. And for Dr. Bricado alone, it was worth watching. However, the rest of it, this is what John Ray presented is not evidence. It's allegations, and he has a history of that. And we've had him on my show, and I'll show you a little clip of that. It got a little bombastic. And when we confronted him, as attorneys confronted us our whole police careers when we were on the stand, he didn't like it, But he presented evidence that was not evidence. It was all incorrect. So when we confronted him with it, he didn't like it. And in this press conference, he's presenting non-evidence, but yet he wants to point the finger. I just want to go to one person in the chat that had a very interesting comment. Julie Funny Girl, there is no legal basis to implicate the daughter. However, let's not pretend that this is a typical stuff people explore as they grow to adulthood and are figuring out who they are. Julie, you're 100% correct, but we also made a little addendum there and said she's the daughter of a serial killer. So do we expect her to be, reading National Geographic or Sports Illustrated and watching Netflix? No. She has potentially some really macabre hobbies and taste in artwork, and perhaps even draws things that are off the wall. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, reasonable minds can differ. We are all very, very different, and we go through it into adulthood, to young adulthood, on many different paths. So if somebody disagrees, that's perfectly fine, but it just seems to be that when you look at the press conference, Mr. Ray is throwing bombs onto Victoria. And when Dr. Bricado gets up there at the microphone, The only comment he said that's actually supportive of what John Ray was doing was he said, these images are suggestive of some of like wrongdoing. That's as far as he went on a professional limb, out on a professional limb. And I respect him for that. He didn't buy into what John Ray was saying. He was very, very careful, seeing it from a detached third-party viewpoint. And I thought the doctor was excellent, and I respect him very much in the fact that he didn't buy into what was going on, and he was very careful with his words. And so he really didn't support the allegations. He supports, thinking about this stuff, investigating this stuff, absolutely. But he didn't support really, other than saying this is suggestive of something. That's as far as he went. So a lot of respect to Dr. Bricado for the way he acted.
Dr. Debbie, your thoughts on Dr. Bricado's presentation in this press conference?
Absolutely. I thought he was well informed, knowledgeable, and shared some key points of which I took a few notes and wanted to comment on. So when he mentions, do killers, particularly the mass murderers, the serial murderers, do they act singularly, independently, unto themselves, or do they tend to partner with another? Well, I think there we could say it depends, right? As he's talking, I'm thinking about one of the cases that the three of us have discussed, that your viewers are certainly very knowledgeable about and interested in, and that's the alleged Idaho quadruple murderer. Now, as the doctor was speaking about sexual violence, and particularly when we have a male offender and female victims, we tend to have a higher propensity and probability of some type of sexual misconduct and such. And yet there is no such evidence there with the alleged Idaho killer. And I know we've used the terminology incel, the involuntary celibate, and that's quite possible with him. Now I'm thinking about another case that many of the viewers will be aware of, and that's referred to as the Ken and Barbie case. Real names, of course, Paul Bernardo, Carla Hamalka. And that becomes another intriguing case, particularly with forensic psychology. Why? Because we had a lot of elements with two people, meaning they were husband and wife. We've got this young couple in their 20s, quite attractive, by the way, hence the moniker Ken and Barbie. And together they participated in horrendous sexual violence, misconduct, rape, as well as killing. So that is a rarity. But interestingly, in that case, it was the male who started first as a serial rapist in Canada. Then he marries his wife, who allegedly, upon hearing, "Oh, honey, would you like to rape and murder young girls?" Apparently, she goes along with it and is a willful participant. So I think the doctor made a lot of good points, but again, back to what we're focusing on here, this far-reaching allegation of a child of a serial killer who would willfully participate based on drawings, and that's how we're making this determination. Once again, I just do not subscribe to it nor agree with it.
Dr. Debbie, excellent presentation again on that. And, the Gilgo 4, Maureen Brainerd Barnes went missing in 2007. Melissa Bartolome in 2009, Megan Waterman 2010, and Amber Costello 2010. Victoria Heuermann is 27 years old. So you do the math. You think she really went along on those cases with her father on those murders? I very seriously doubt it. About a year ago, we had Dr. Joni Johnson on the show, and we asked her straight out, do you think that Asa Ellerup was involved? Because it's easy to make the connection. If Asa Ellerup was involved, then perhaps Victoria Heuermann was also involved. But I'm not seeing. Look, when we first started covering this case, I really felt that the Suffolk County Police, the Gilgo Beach Task Force, cleared her too quickly, because I wasn't ready to say, oh, she didn't do it. But they had been working on this case for, I guess, that by the time they took it down, about 14 or 15 months, I believe that was about. And so they had him under surveillance, and they did their research. So they were more qualified to say who wasn't involved than we are, looking from the outside looking in. So I asked Dr. Joni Johnston, who was on the show, and we're going to listen to what she said in regards to this.
Control.
I believe that, but just want to ask Dr. Joni, do you think she knew about his nefarious activities or was involved?
I do not think that she was involved in his activities. I would be very surprised. Now, we know that serial killers about 25% of the time commit their crimes with somebody else. So it's not, super rare for that to happen. I don't see that happening here. And, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to say I was blindsided by that. I just don't see that.
And if you're wrong, we're going to pull you back on the show to make you
and yell at me. Yeah. To explain myself. And the other thing I would say is, the whole issue of, did she know? My question is, did she know what? Did she have suspicions that her husband maybe was seeing sex workers? Possibly. I know there were certain parts of the house she wasn't supposed to go into. So clearly, I think she must have had some indication that something was not right, or he was secretive about some things. That's a long way to go from my husband is secretive, or he's keeping weapons in the basement. I don't want to see them, or whatever. Or he's acting strange or whatever, to my husband is a, sexually motivated serial killer who's picking up sex workers and torturing them to death.
But she passively allowed his behavior. And maybe, she was abused to the point where she was beaten down that she couldn't object to his behavior.
Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what kind of conversations they had. We don't know at some point, did she say to him, are you seeing sex workers? Or are you having an affair? We don't know what went on in their home and what kind of conversations they had.
100%. So that was Dr. Joni. And I thought that was, sorry, I wasn't quick enough to the drawer there. That was Dr. Joni. And I thought that, she came right out and said, no, I don't think she was involved. And like me, of course, non-serial killer expert, me, just opinionated like everyone else, I thought that perhaps she might have known about it, just because there were so many factors in this case that make everyone uncomfortable. And one, of course, is the condition of that house. That house, to me, gives me pause. And that's P-A-U-S-E, not P-A-W-S. It gives me pause because I almost can't believe humans can live in that house, And here's this guy who's an architect, apparently makes pretty damn good money, and his house is an eyesore on the block. I'm sure the neighbors would like to blow that house up so it doesn't lower the value of their homes. But those things make me very suspect. Professor Mike.
Billy, yeah, I think, and I always tell my students, what seems to be the most logical, reliably accurate explanation. So I think in this case, and when we talked to Dr. Johnson, she was giving us, some real basic ideas that, all husbands and wives work out their own relationship. She may have known that he had some girlfriends occasionally on the side and things like that, and that maybe he was visiting prostitutes, and she may have turned a blind eye to it. And she may have accepted the fact that, remember, this was his home that he had since he was a baby. And she's married. He brings her to that house, and she's looking at this house, and she's fitting it to his house. It's not a house that they bought together, and she's now in charge of the house and saying, okay, this is my house, and I want you to paint this. I want you to fix this. And the mom in the family, the wife in the family saying, this is my home, and we're going to work on this together. No, that was his house, his realm. And I think she was okay with a lot of that, his controlling, quiet, hiding behavior, sneaky behavior. And I think she probably knew on some levels that maybe he was getting his jollies visiting a sex worker here and there. And I don't think it went any farther than that. To implicate Asa just because we don't like her behavior after this is all come after the arrest, I think is ridiculous, because we all react to stress very differently. And I think it's unfair to Victoria to say, your dad's a serial killer and we think your artwork is creepy. where's the connection? Where's the conduct? Just because I read something doesn't mean I do something. Just because I like something doesn't mean that as a hobby or I'm reading about it, I'm fascinated by it. When I was a kid, I loved the Apollo program. I never just wanted ever to be an astronaut. We can like things and read things, and yet we don't act them out. And so
Although,
I think that,
Mike, one thing that just came to my mind, which I
What's
always
that?
thought was funny. When we went on the police department, part of the psychological test was that you had to draw a house. Remember
Yes.
that?
Oh,
You
yeah.
had to draw, and people are like, well, what are they looking for? Because I couldn't draw for shit,
Right,
Oh,
right.
make sure there's smoke coming out of the chimney. Make sure there's
Nice
lots of windows. Make sure there's like a car in the driveway and there's maybe a kid in the yard. That shows like you're happy, your family. Yeah. And I heard that like there was some candidates would have a guy in the yard with an axe chopping, chopping down trees or something. Like, no, I don't know if we're looking for that, or something they would find out through the drawing that this guy is not New York City cop material.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
is that the same thing we're looking at Victoria Heuermann's artwork, as we're saying she's mentally unstable because she likes to do these type of things? Dr. Debbie.
Yeah, I love the points that Professor Mike just presented, as well as what Dr. Joni said. So to maybe recap and combine some of that, again, I think if we're looking at the killer, the alleged killer himself, and the artwork, then yes, I think we could get assessments and determination about the mindset and intent about people. But because the daughter may have some type of interest, and let's face it, crime and a lot of the murders and the murder categories, whether it's a singular murder, double, triple, quadruple, serial murder, mass murder, workplace, school-based, people are absolutely fascinated with our field and with our field of study. And because of that, we have these great podcasts, and particularly Sergeant Bill's podcast and Professor Mike, and top of the list among the best of the best. But people love to discuss this, and it's almost like the octopus. Okay, the home base is crime, but then the tentacles that are outreaching almost anything and everything that has to do with it becomes, again, another area of intrigue and fascination. But now we refer back here to Dr. Joni and her points, and how far do we go with making an allegation? It's the daughter who's not even alive during a lot of what's happened here. And you said something very interesting too, Sergeant Bill, and the conditions in which these people lived, right? That tells us something. You all, both of you, of course, for decades of involvement going into people's homes, don't you quickly gain and gather some type of thinking about these people? How do they live? So I think things like that are very relevant. But the whole concept too about marriage and family and what goes on behind closed doors, truly, does anybody from the outside ever really know? Not really. Only the couples themselves, in terms of how's their communication? What are they privy to about another? Do people just coexist? Is it a reason to be connected because of finances and it's more convenient? So all of this, I think, again, does not make Asa guilty of anything, nor does it make Victoria and or their son. I think all three of whom must be absolutely shocked and mortified and disgusted by it all, the way the rest of us would be.
Dr. Deborah, the only thing I did agree with is like when you tell your wife or a significant other, stay out of that room, they better listen. I'm just kidding.
That would never work in my house.
That wouldn't work in my house either. She would never listen, This is the only room she doesn't want to come in because she doesn't want to be on the show, But other than that, no, right. That would be a red flag. Don't you dare come down in the basement. What's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go down in the basement, see what the hell's going on down there, that he doesn't want you down there. From the chat, reality with Krista Marie. Is the world, anybody believes that he hunted the victims while they were on vacation or whatever, and then when they came back, they only engaged it wouldn't be out of the realm. Well, I think that, based on the records of when, especially the Gilgo 4 went missing, they did, a investigation, and they saw that each and every time Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, and I always like to shout out to the victims and to their families. And this is what this case is really all about: is the victims, not sort of the titillation of following a serial killer, but it's become that. But when Asa Ellerup and the family, Victoria and her son, would go on vacation, this is when became known as the Gilgo 4 went missing. So was that part of Rex Heuermann's modus operandi? You bet, because he was doing more than just murder. As we recently learned, that room he had down in the basement of that house was a torture room. And I would almost guarantee that the Gilgo Beach Task Force has pictures, has photographs, because they recovered so many electronic devices, cameras, digital devices, and they're just not ready to release that yet. And if that will be, and we hate to use the term smoking gun, but I have to use it, that would be the smoking gun in this case. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Billy, there's so much that you and I and Phil and no one else knows about yet, because he not only did they went through that house twice very thoroughly, but they also went through, I think he had like at least 2 storage facilities on Long Island, and he liked to keep all those electronic things like laptops and cell phones and all kinds of probably beepers also that he probably had. He was a hoarder. And so there's probably all kinds of images. And you know as well as I do, we've talked about this before. You look at the BTK killer, he always liked to have a little piece of the victims, an earring, a ring, something from their wallet, their driver's license, and things like that. And he always liked, and that would bring back the memories and all of the excitement and the rush. And so, so there's all of these things. You are right. There's definitely a lot more. And I'm sure the pictures and the images and all those other things will slam the door in any doubt as to whether or not the police got the right guy, and he's the guy. And so let's not forget, you and I and Phil, we always thought in the beginning that they cleared Asa too quickly. But as you say, they had a lot more information at their fingertips. And every time that they were away, that's when, a girl or 2 would go missing. So, let's not do the fantastic, ridiculous stretch of the imagination stuff. Let's see what's the most reliable, common sense answer as to how he acted and when he acted and who was there. He was probably always alone. They were away from their home. They were in other parts of the United States, Vermont, New Jersey, places like that. And I think one time they went to Iceland. And so that's his MO. He was a lone wolf acting that way.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, share us with your friends, your family, your friends, your enemies. Maybe your enemies will become your friends if you share Police Off the Cuff with them. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels that has been growing so largely in this last month or two. We're getting people from all over the world discovering Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories from a police perspective with fantastic guests. And we really appreciate all of you guys that are our subscribers, our fans, our friends. I want to play this because News Nation did an analysis on this case, and not on this case, on this press conference. And they feel largely the way we do. And I just want to play a little bit of this.
Legal analyst Misty Maris. Misty, great to see you. This case, though, very disturbing. I want to talk to you about these additional allegations: murder, cannibalism, torture. What is it going to do for the legal case against Heuermann, and what will the district attorney need to do from here with these allegations?
Well, this was an attorney who represents the victims' families. And so it's a different perspective, what we're hearing in this press conference. And to me, Hannah, it was actually quite shocking that not only was he making allegations relating to cannibalism and all of these other shocking areas, but he's also specifically talking about linking Rex Heuermann's family and specifically his daughter to the crimes. Now, that is being done without anything more than just information that he had ripped from the internet, searches and postings of artwork and other materials. So there's nothing actually from an evidentiary perspective that does make that link or leads to those conclusions. So the district attorney, there is a task force on this case. They have made very, very clear that the family at this point is not being looked at as being involved. It says it in every single filing. The family was not involved. And in fact, Rex Heuermann's modus operandi was to commit these crimes when they were out of town. So this was a really, really big statement without a lot of actual evidence to back it up.
And prosecutors have said, I mean, they said it immediately that they don't believe Heuermann's family is involved. But there are so many allegations around Victoria, like you mentioned, just from her social media presence. Could social media posts tie a potential suspect to serious charges like murder and cannibalism?
Not without more. So what we saw was basically artwork and postings relating to other types of things in the public sphere. And some of it was her own artwork, and others was artwork that she was posting that was actually created by others. So sure, could that link somebody? Yes, but not without more, not just because somebody is interested in some type of artwork or writings or readings or anything like that. So certainly if there was more to that, like we see with Rex Heuermann himself, think about what is in that affidavit. They're talking about he's interested in serial killers. They found 2 books, including a book relating to the criminal minds of serial killers and how that actually interrelates to the crimes. And they're linking a document that he created to the actual crimes and the way that the bodies were found. So that's completely different than looking at somebody's social media presence and saying, well, if they posted something about a TV show, specifically the show Hannibal, well, then they must ultimately be a cannibal. That is a huge leap.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, kind of a dangerous assumption to make.
I'm with you here. So we're also seeing new photos of Heuermann at a gun club. The reason that's so important, according to attorneys, is that's where 2 bodies were found. But why is this important to the prosecution's case?
This is incredibly important because not only is it where these bodies were found in Manorville, but it also has a timestamp. And it's putting Rex Heuermann in that area around the times they believe the bodies were deposited. This is specifically relating to Jessica Taylor, who he has now been charged with her murder. So that timestamp is yet another piece of evidence that's going to link Rex Heuermann directly to the bodies. Because keep in mind, Hannah, there is forensic evidence in this case.
This little slide here is really a brilliant slide because it gives us a timeline.
Mhm.
And you see Sandra Castilla, 1993, and Jessica Taylor, 2003. And that was out in Manorville, which is this gun club that he was well, they said he wasn't a member, but I guess he was a guest there. And he, as we all know, he was a huge gun buff. And then we look at the other ones, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, Megan Waterman, and Evelyn Costello. Still, there's some years apart in between Maureen Brainerd Barnes and Melissa Bartolome, and then there's 2 in 2010. And that doesn't mean that's all he did. There could absolutely be other bodies out there that they just have not found or they just have not connected him to. In fact, we expect, and maybe we're being optimistic, that Ray Tierney and the Gilgo Beach Task Force will soon be indicting Rex Heuermann for Valerie Mack. Right now, we don't believe they probably don't have the evidence to do it, at least perhaps the DNA evidence. But look, we know that Maureen Brainerd Barnes, that case wasn't initially part of the Gilgo 4 till they were able to connect the DNA evidence to it, and then they quickly added that, the 4th one, to the indictment. And then, of course, we know just recently Sandra Castilla, shocked at that one because 1993. And just think The DNA on Sandra Castillo was from a hair underneath the body that belonged to Rex Heuermann, and the other hair was from his ex-wife, listed in the bail application document as witness number 3, and that was his ex-wife. So I just want to answer one quick question in the chat, and I've answered this a million times, but I'll answer it 1,000,001. Karen Sorrentino, the family's hairs were found on victims. Come on, anyone else in this world would be charged, circumstantial or otherwise. It smells. Karen, I don't want to be rude or anything, but it does not, and we can explain it scientifically through something called Locard's theory of exchange. And Dr. Edmund Locard wrote the theory of exchange, where we all lose 50, 100, 200 hairs a day in our natural environment. And those hairs get on things. Does that mean we're serial killers? So inside Rex Heuermann's house, and he used those burlap bags to tie up the bodies. His wife's and his daughter's hair could have gotten on them. Again, everyone points, well, why wasn't his son's hair on it? Well, maybe his son didn't go into the locations that he stored these things. And that is my explanation to it. But it certainly does not mean because their hairs were on the bodies that they were killers. What it means is what I just explained. Dr. Debbie, I can see you want to weigh in on this.
No, again, I'm glad that Karen asked the question, and your explanation, of course, Sergeant Bill, was right on point and excellent. The only thing I would add to it, as I have also been asked to speak with other media outlets about that exact issue, Dr. Debbie, what does that mean when we have hairs from another right there at the crime scene? But exactly what you said is on point. And the example I give of transference is really consistent with the pet owner and the pet. So for those who have pets, the dog, the cat sits on the couch, and most likely hair will appear on the couch from the animal. Then the pet owner comes, sits down on the couch, and will likely have that hair on one's clothing. So hence, that's what I think happened as well. I don't really, again, think that the wife nor anybody else in that family was a direct participant in anything of what Rex Heuermann was the direct participant. And Sergeant Bill, even when this case first came about and you and I started talking about it, I remember vividly we were asking one another, well, what do you think and what do you think? Are we done with the victims, or are we going to have more victims? And we both thought there would be more victims on this case, and I think we may potentially have even more. So that's the importance of our field, really looking at DNA, looking at the evidence. I appreciate the chronological sequencing of events you just put up. That's very important as well. But the allegations, which started today's conversation, I'm just not in favor of.
Nor am I. Tom Cusinelli, retired NYPD captain. Ray is waiting to get paid for a movie or a docuseries. Look, John Ray has been involved in this case as the attorney for the Gilbert
Shannon
Gilbert family. And, I try to explain to everyone, Shannon Gilbert, as of right now, is not a murder. It's not listed. And the only person's opinion that matters is the Suffolk County medical examiner. He determines whether or not it is ruled a homicide. He's ruled it not undetermined. He couldn't determine it. And then, of course, John Ray brought in Dr. Michael Baden, who, his findings, he agreed with the medical examiner, but said, but based on the fact that the hyoid bone appears to be cracked, this is death by asphyxia. It's homicidal. It was just the most lame ruling I've ever seen. And look, the circumstances behind Shannon Gilbert, certainly suspicious. Certainly, any one of those people in that complex and the chronology of what happened to her, could be a murder, except John Ray is trying to connect Rex Heuermann to the Oak Beach murder of Shannon Gilbert. There's no way he was there. Because if this 6'6", 300-pound ogre was there, at least 10 witnesses would have said he was there. And not a single person has said he was there. So I know there are those out there that are going to be very disappointed that we're saying, look, we have to agree But what the medical examiner's findings are and the reinvestigation of it, because I know everyone wants to say how corrupt the Suffolk County Police is, but the reinvestigation of that case by the Gilgo Beach Task Force, if we don't accept it, there's nothing else. No one else, an attorney isn't going to tell the police that's a murder and you either make it a murder or because it's not. It's what the medical examiner says it is. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, in his press conference, Mr. Ray held up some of the pictures and we saw one of them. There was another one where there was a woman in a reclining position and she was naked and she was above the antlers of like a deer or a moose. And in the background, it was looked like long, high grass and like marsh. And he said, look at this picture. Look at this woman being killed, laying on these antlers. Look at the marsh in the background. That's Shannon Gilbert. That's just how Shannon Gilbert died. So he's taking one picture with something in the background and saying that Victoria Heuermann drew this or liked this picture that was in a book that was produced by somebody else that probably, who knows, maybe it sold 1 million copies, maybe it's only sold 100. But he's saying that picture is indicative of her knowing or somehow participating in a homicide of Shannon Gilbert. That is so far outside the bounds of reality that it's really difficult. And I think that's where Shannon Gilbert's family even criticized Mr. Ray's efforts by saying it was, irresponsible for what he did because it does not help their family whatsoever. Very, 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 very troubling.
Absolutely. Let me finish this report by News Nation and then we'll move on.
Know that there were hairs that were collected off of some of the victims that are linking Rex Heuermann or other family members through this theory called transference. However, forensics are going to be challenged ultimately because these cases are so old. And so there's obviously going to be, from a defense perspective, you're going to get an expert in who's going to try and undercut that. So anything else that can link Rex Heuermann to the manner, means, giving him opportunity to commit the crime, that timestamp, incredibly important.
Misty, I'm running out of time. I want to get this question in. The amount of evidence, information we're learning on this case is staggering. It seems like there's always new information coming out. Do you think there could be more charges in this case as we move forward?
I do, and here's why. Specifically, that document that was found on Rex Heuermann's computer in his basement was created in the year 2000 to 2002. In that document, there are references to what to do different next time. We have one body from 1993, and then we have 7 years in between. So that is a look back period that prosecutors and the task force are absolutely going to be looking into, because if you're saying use stronger rope, the lighter rope snaps too easily, well, that means you've experimented with it before. And so that 10-year period that we did not know was not previously implicated is going to be front and center for the task force moving forward.
Misty Maris, always.
She made really great points right there. I thought outstanding because, one of the things is that Dr. Gary Bricado said the average serial killer starts at age 26. Go back to 1993, Rex Heuermann was 29, 30 years old. So does that mean he didn't start till he was 29 or is he the average serial killer that started when he was 26 and we just haven't found the other bodies that he's disposed of in other locations? We spoke so many times in the show about modus operandi, signature, right? And modus operandi changed in this case. It seemed like he was much more violent earlier on than he became. Well, we don't specifically know that because he was torturing his victims. But the way he killed Sandra Castilla, just absolutely horrific. And, did he change? And I was always one to think that, serial killers, they and criminals in a group, as a group, like to stay with their modus operandi and don't really like to change up. But that's not always true. Dr. Debbie, you are the criminologist, doctor of criminology. Let us know your thoughts.
Thank you. And it really is a great point you raised, Sergeant Bill. So I'll answer by saying I do think it's possible. These killers can change over time. Why? because just how you said the onset of, was he 26, was he 29? That's a big difference between now rounding the corner on he's 60 now. So as people age, there's a different approach to life. And yes, he was horrendous and brutal and barbaric in the manner in which he violated these victims. It's just beyond sickening and shocking. But I would suggest that some of whom could change just based on the logical reasoning that they're aging out. They're getting older.
Absolutely. Let me play this. This is also some of the attorneys. And, you know, the Suffolk County is a very somewhat incestuous area in regards to attorneys, because I want to show you a picture on the screen. And you'll be like, whoa. That gentleman to the left, his name is Vesmetev. He was an associate of John Ray. Guess who Vesmetev represents right now? Victoria Heuermann. So these guys all know each other. This is Robert Macedonio. Guess who he represents? Asa Ellerup. He's the one that got her that 7-figure deal to do a documentary on her husband. So, like, this is a lot of, look, why is Gloria Allred hanging around? She wants to get paid. You know what I mean? So there's all these attorneys swimming around like sharks in the water looking to get paid. And, you know, I hate to have that opinion of attorneys, but, you know, when you see you see them go to work wearing track shoes, you know, they're chasing ambulances, you know. So in the way of John Ray, he's done all of this pretty much pro bono. He hasn't made a dime off this case. And to his credit, he's kept it alive. However, he wants to get paid. And I don't know. He's trying to figure out a way to get paid. And right now, I don't think he's figured it out yet, but he's still there. And when I see that attorney Gloria Allred, oh my God, she's been chasing ambulances for years, you know, and she's representing families in this case now too. Let me just play this.
In the house was the wife, Rex Heuermann, and Rex Heuermann, and the other girl. The other girl, who we believe to be Karen Vergara.
I just want to make a point here. Rodney Harrison looks like he wants to be there as much as I want to be next to a beehive, you know. And you can read his body language, and he can't wait to get the hell out of that. He's probably questioning himself, why am I at this press conference? You know, why? And it turned out he had maybe a month left as the Suffolk County Police Commissioner because his term was up, and there was a new county executive who was going to appoint his own guy. But for whatever reason, he stood next to John Ray during this press conference.
Got it.
Heuermann has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of second-degree murder, and the deaths of Melissa Barthelme, Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, after DNA evidence tied him to the killings. He's also the prime suspect in another case. Now, joining me now is Robert Macedonio, attorney representing Macedonio. I apologize. I actually practiced it before I started too. Who joins us now? I appreciate it. All right, you've got a lot to respond to here. Let me just let you respond to what we just heard.
And I think the DA's statement says it all. It's hard to take anyone serious wearing a purple hat at a press conference. You know, Johnny Ray is trying to keep himself relevant in this case since the arrest of Rex Heuermann. It's been stated several times, not only by the police commissioner who stood by him, by the DA's office, that Shannon Gilbert, who's Johnny's client, is not related to any of the other Gilgo victims. So what he's desperately trying to do is link a civil defendant to his clients, so he has somebody to sue to recoup the tens of thousands of dollars he has spent chasing his tail the past 12 years that he's been involved in this case.
So is it not true?
Completely outlandish claims. I categorically deny him on behalf of Asa Ellerup. It's just ridiculous.
So again, yeah, just to follow up on that, not true that she knew about the sex workers.
It's not true. Look, taking an iron. You're going to fight with someone taking an iron. You go back, the allegations go back several years ago. The children are 34 and 26 now. So they were what? Teens, if not younger. The house is very small. Everybody's seen the house. So the allegation is small children are upstairs in the house why Rex has sex workers downstairs in the house. It makes no logical sense. It's a nice middle-class neighborhood. The houses are all very close together. Any of this would have been witnessed by any of the neighbors. It makes no relevant sense. Like I said, you go back to the purple hat. He looks like he's more trying out for a part in the Willy Wonka movie than he is representing any victims.
What about the hair her hair allegedly on the duct tape of one of the victims?
Well, you have the hair, but hair is of likeness. Until we get actual DNA reports, which none of us have seen, you could have a hair of likeness. The DNA comes from the root of a hair. I don't think any of that's been actually laid out in court. It's a hair of her likeness. So we'll wait to see the evidence comes out in court and really let this case be tried in the courtroom and not by Johnny Ray at the press conferences. In addition to the police commissioner, come the first of the year, is no longer going to be the police commissioner. We have a new county executive that's going to be elected, and they're going to appoint their own police commissioner. So again,
so this was several months ago. My point is, there's another attorney, an associate of him, saying the same basic things that we are saying right there. I just want to bring up someone in the chat. Doc K, thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. My pops used to say, the state of your house reflects the state of your mind. Couldn't be more appropriate. I think you're right. You know, and I was trained as a kid. I played sports as an athlete. And we were always trained where I grew up in Levittown when we played football to tuck your jersey into your pants because you looked sharper. You looked like you were a team. And then the other teams came sloppy, and our coaches would say, we're going to kick their ass just because they don't tuck their shirts in, and that things do say things about you, and your home says a big thing about you. And Doc K, thank you very much for that statement. Dr. Debbie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like what Doc K raises, and she's absolutely right. And as are you, Sergeant Bill. So how we dress, how we speak, our demeanor, our decorum, it's a judgmental thing, right? We'd like to think we're not judging, so maybe we'll replace the word judge with observing, but we can actually gauge a lot. And I know both of you and Detective Phil would have probably shaken your heads on so many occasions walking into the environments in which you did. But we know this house is very peculiar, the hoarding issues, this downstairs area that nobody's allowed to enter. So all of this, I think, is going to come out in court when, the case goes to trial. And these will be different little gems or nuggets along the way. Now, I always like to say with any case we're talking about, either past, present, or future, that a case is really A to Z. So we have a lot of elements, but this will be an element. This will be something that should be raised and talked about the whole, state of this house and what went on there. And I do believe that the house is the crime scene, that he did take them there, contrary to, the thought of, well, somebody would have seen and heard and said. The rest of the family members were not there. So he had the perfect opportunity when they're vacationing to have all of this unto himself.
He had a way that he did things, and he was successful, and he had a way not to be seen, apparently, when he brought these women into the house. Ya's daughter from the chat, has anyone mentioned SRI? If you've listened to testimonials from victims of this, it wouldn't sound so far-fetched. Yeah, you know what it is? The testimonials, he talks about having affidavits. An affidavit means nothing. It absolutely means someone swore to something that they believe is true. The person that's swearing could be lying. Attorney Mike.
Yeah, Billy, an affidavit is just a legal document saying you write a statement and you believe to the best of your ability this is accurate. If it turns out to be inaccurate, it doesn't mean you lied. It just means that at the time you thought it actually was the truth and it was accurate. And you and I and Phil have discussed this. It's a statement, no more, no less, of what someone believes until it is corroborated by following up on, verifying facts that are alleged, time, place, manner, where people were, who you're talking about. Then, if it can be corroborated, then it could be used as reliable evidence. But Mr. Ray a lot of times has affidavits, and yet they don't seem to bring in new witnesses. So therefore, you got to say there's a lot of things that he can say, but there's very little that he can corroborate with other accounts to verify what these Affians say. And that's sad because it throws people. It's like a, it throws people off the scent. Yeah, I forget what the expression is. It throws people off the scent, and they go down rabbit holes, and they think that the rabbit hole is the way to go. No, what is the most likely common sense thing that probably happened? What can the police verify through technical data with cell phones, DNA evidence? That's the way to go.
Absolutely. Mike, this is really interesting, the next thing I'm going to play, because what it is, we had John Ray on our show, and it got quite bombastic because we disagreed with him, and he got a little ornery, I would say. And so we went back at him, and I just want to play a little bit of it. And I like John Ray. Don't get me wrong. I just think he's flamboyant. He's outrageous. And what he's presenting is not evidence. It's absolutely not evidence.
Was scattered. There was a lot of different things, and
Clothing wasn't scattered at all. That's not accurate. What happened is her jeans were found with her pocketbook, her cell phone, a perfume bottle cap, and some money in her wallet. They were found in a circle right behind Dr. Peter Hackett's house, about a quarter to a third of a mile away from the body. Nothing else was scattered. There were just jeans that were left there. So that's not accurate either. You got to know the facts. If you want to know talk on these things, you got to know the facts.
Are you saying that the clothing wasn't found with the body?
The only clothing found with the body, she was wearing a white blouse, as Barbara Brennan testified. She saw her very clearly in the daylight and before Shannon disappeared. And Gus Coletti identified her as having a white blouse on as well. And
the jeans were found some other location from where the body was found.
The jeans were found in a different location.
Yes, so
Mr. Ray, based on Michael Boden's report, he wrote, she was still wearing deteriorating fragments of clothing, a white or tan shirt, black brassiere, thong panties, and blue denim jeans. That's in Boden's report.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
The blue
denim. If he's incorrect here, but he could be incorrect in other parts of his report. That's a favorite line of attorneys. Because if this is incorrect, he made lots of mistakes then. Did you read this? Hold on, Mr. Ray. Did you read this for accuracy? You said you worked on it with him.
I did. I didn't write the document.
It's only 3 pages long. If there's mistakes in a 3-page paper by a former New York City medical examiner, that I have questions about the accuracy of this entire report.
Okay, so you say because he mentions the blue denim jeans, which were found elsewhere, his entire report is wrong, right?
Well, yeah. Because you worked on it with him and you read it and you said you worked it on it with him. So now you're saying we're wrong about reporting the clothing, and it's right in this report. And you said you worked on it with him.
Yeah, I did, but I didn't write the report.
But you should have read it over to make sure it's accuracy. Look, when we're on the stand and attorneys pound the shit out of us for bad reports, that's part of being a detective. And this is a medical doctor with a 50-year experienced attorney. There's big mistakes in this report.
That's it.
Boom, boom, boom. Explosions, fireworks, everything was going off there. And John Ray didn't like that. But let me tell you something. That was payback for my 27 years on the NYPD. When I raised my right hand, I got on the stand, I got beat up by a guy wearing a Dr. Seuss outfit, So he didn't like the way it felt. But I liked the way it felt asking the questions, because that report was written by Dr. Michael Boden. And there was about 3 mistakes in a 3-page report. How credible. And John Ray said he worked on it with him. Then did you certify it as correct? Because that's part of working on a report. So so you missed those 3 mistakes. Throw that whole damn report out. Throw it all out.
Bill, remember that report and what Dr. Boden wrote formed the basis, the biggest basis and the most, solid basis that Mr. Ray used to try to connect Shannon Gilbert with the Gilgo Beach killings. Without Mr. Boden's report, Dr. Boden's report, he would have nothing. So by taking this one report and saying this proves that certain facts to be true, and then have the report to be very inaccurate, is really troubling. And unfortunately, he didn't really do a favor for his credibility in that respect, because he didn't come with the goods. He promised, and he didn't deliver the goods that night.
No, he did not. And you know something, Mike and Dr. W realize this too. We as law enforcement, if we do a shitty report, we're taught from day one, the personification of professionalism is good report writing.
Mhm.
And that's a 60-year MD, now who sells himself all over the world as an expert witness. He writes a 3-page report that was certified as correct by this attorney, and there was 3 mistakes in it in 3 pages. Hey, dude, you just lost all credibility with me. Schmitty from the chat. Thanks for the $5 super sticker. I love that Dr. Bricado, while he stood alongside Johnny Ray, didn't exactly buy what John Ray was selling. He has set himself apart. No subjectivity. I agree. I question now whether Dr. Bricado regrets the day he stood at the side in that press conference, just as John Ray probably regrets the day he came on my show. Dr. Debbie.
Yes, I actually wanted to share, Sergeant Bill. I know you know a lot about my background, but I may not have shared this in the whole conversation about report writing. But early on in my career, I was in my early 20s and I was teaching report writing at our local police academy to the recruits. And I've since gone on to write a book about it, but nonetheless, I would always say exactly what you're saying, that mistakes are costly. There's no room for error, and it absolutely unravels not only one's credibility, but the entirety of the case. So I'm absolutely with you on the importance then and now of great report writing. Otherwise, it's could be a disaster.
Dr. W, when I taught college, there was this detective from the 2-3 squad. I'll say his name because it's really positive. This guy, Billy Dunn, he's now a first-grade detective. And he wrote this DD5. It's known as a complaint follow-up. And the guy was in for murder. And he covered every base that a defense attorney would beat him up on the stand about. At 2,200 hours, I asked the defendant if he would like something to eat. I got him a cheeseburger and French fries. At 22:15 hours, the burger was presented. He ate the whole thing. I gave him something to drink. I then asked him, would he like to go to the bathroom? I took him to the bathroom. Every step of the way, he documented what he had done for the perpetrator. Because when he goes to court, the defense attorney says, you abused my client. When did he eat? Did you let him go to the bathroom? You were torturing him. Well, and then you read that. Well, he was given a cheeseburger and fries at such and such a time. He was told to go to bed. We gave him the opportunity to make 3 phone calls or whatever you did. Every single thing was documented. And when I read it, and I read it to my students, I said, where does the defense attorney go now with that whole narrative of trying to beat up the detective for abusing his client? Mike.
Yeah, Billy, part of being an attorney is when you're in law school and you learn these things is to read very carefully, analyze very carefully, write very carefully. And you study hundreds and hundreds of cases from all appellate courts in the United States. And the idea that, I don't mean to gang up on John Ray, but he said, it's his report. He put that out there as being accurate, as being the foundation for his accusations that, this Shannon Gilbert was actually a victim of the Gilgo Beach killer. And yet he actually did not read it for accuracy. And that hurt his credibility. And that's really bad. You got to be very, very careful. You got to go read that that report like you're a biblical scholar reading the Old and the New Testament. That's how close you go over it. You don't let anything to chance. What Bill Dunn did was fantastic because that's the way, reading every single line, reading and taking a look at everything that was said, chronological order, because chronological order is so important. Unfortunately, Johnny Ray didn't have that capability for some reason with the Dr. Bodden report. But That's the way you got to go through this, meticulous. And so I hope no one thinks that the police were not meticulous with the Gilgo Beach Task Force, with the Shannon Gilbert investigation, because they were.
They absolutely are now. JG from the chat. Debbie Goodman is fantastic. Hey, wait a minute. That's great. No, Dr. Debbie, the fans love you here.
Yeah, I love them.
Cheryl F. Hi there, Mel. Still good to see you, my friend. I hope you are well. So no one should be helping this family financially. Reality with Christy Marie, we don't know when they were unalived. All right, do we? Reality, we know when they disappeared. We just learned recently in the new bail application document that not only was he kidnapping them off the street, well, under the guise of hiring an escort, but he was taking them to his little torture room. So they may have disappeared and they may have been killed at one point, and then at another point, they may have been dumped at his dump site, as he referred to them to on that bail application document, dump site 1, dump site 2. So we can't even imagine of what these poor women went through when they were, hired by this guy, and then he somehow rendered them unconscious. And the evidence they have against this guy is just, as I like to say, tractor trailers full of evidence they have. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, there's no doubt that the police have a fabulous, solid case against him. And just going back to the Shannon Gilbert thing one more time. Yeah, in the beginning, with Chief Burke, everybody's got to get past that. Chief Burke has no friends in the Suffolk County Police Department. There would be no reason whatsoever to cover up for any sort of misdeeds he may have been involved in. And, that sort of thing, tying him in with Rex Heuermann and Shannon Gilbert. No, that the task force and District Attorney Tierney would love to would love to get another solved case, and that would be Shannon Gilbert, and hang it on Rex Heuermann or Jim Burke. There is no reason for anybody to think that they're not professional, 100% professional, doing their job, doing it well, and looked at every single little bit of evidence that they could gather in all of these cases. I think that the public should really feel like what has gone on the last 2 years with the investigation has been nothing short of excellent.
100%. Tim B. I'm glad he has the press conference. Something is up. Not sure what. I wish the talking heads would quit whining and look into it. You have resources. Prove him wrong. No, it's not our job to prove him wrong. You know whose job it is to prove him wrong? The police. And the fact that they're either not looking into this or not taking this seriously speaks volumes, because they know where they're going. No, they know all about this investigation. Because he may be inventing things, and other attorneys have accused him of trying to remain relevant, trying to connect the dots because he's looking for someone to sue. And then police is supposed to waste all their time barking up a tree because he's bringing forth these unvetted allegations and witnesses that frankly are not credible witnesses. But you guys eat it up like a pizza with anchovies, and it's like maybe anchovies wasn't the right word. Okay, meatballs,
I love
sausages. Many people don't like anchovies, but you guys eat it up. Like the first press conference, and I'll play a little bit of it now. These allegations were as wild as you could get, and I would like to know if Ray Tierney and the Gilgo Beach Task Force has tried to vet this information. Let's play a little bit of this. This was from the first press conference where Rodney Harrison stood next to him.
As to the witnesses, as to the evidence, in no particular order of importance, because so much of it is important. I have stood as a beacon as a civilian beacon to the people who are involved in this case to come and talk, where they didn't want to approach the police out of fear, out of apprehension, out of in some cases, a natural distaste for the police department because of the work these people were in. So they would then come to me and speak to me, and I would interview them, and we would then cooperate, them and the police department. And so with that in mind, the first two witnesses I'm going to talk about are both of them are not Suffolk County residents. I should point out that we obtained from these two affidavits, their names will go unmentioned. Their names are blotted out of the affidavits, but the affidavits will be available to you right after the press conference. As to the first one I'll talk about, this is a witness who has every reason to have no bias, no interest in the case whatsoever. She was not a sex worker, is not a sex worker, and instead, back in the 90s, in the 1990s, she was what is known then and now as a swinger. She would have a sex partner, and they would go to certain sex clubs in New York City where they would switch partners with other people of like kind. One of the most important places that they would go was called La Trapeze on West 27th Street in New York, right near Rex Heuermann's office. And this was a notorious place for swapping, for switching partners. Sometimes several hundred people at a time would be involved in this place in its heyday. Its heyday was in the late 90s, right at the time that Karen Brigada is involved in this case. In this situation, this particular woman was dating a police officer from New York City who was in narcotics, a detective, and they would go to these switchy clubs, these swapping clubs. At a certain time, at or about Valentine's Day of 1996, I believe, the couple went to La Trapeze, and I think it was on the wall at La Trapeze where an advertisement was placed to go to a house in Massapequa Park for partying, for switching, for swapping. She went with her boyfriend out to Long Island, but before they went, her boyfriend picked up a woman in New York, in the city, who had apparently just gotten out of jail, and she was disheveled and hungry, and she was a sex worker. We don't know the details yet of how he came to know her, but he knew her. And she came in the car with the two of them. They went to Massapequa Park. Before they got there, they stopped at a gas station, and the girl who was with them expressed some apprehension about where they were going and why. That was all wiped out when it was pointed out that he's a police detective, so don't worry, no problem. They ended up going to Rex Heuermann's house. In the house was the wife of Rex Heuermann and Rex Heuermann and the other girl. The other girl who we believe to be Karen Vergata. This girl disappears downstairs at the house. Rex Heuermann disappears. And according to our witness and other witnesses I've talked to, when men are swingers with their partner, very often they switch sexually. They go back and forth between male and female. And so Heuermann leaves the main floor and disappears either into another bedroom or downstairs. It's not clear. And the witness talks to Rex's wife. She doesn't want to have sex like she had expected to occur because our client believes our client is an African-American woman. And Heuermann didn't like that. Ellerup, rather, didn't like that. So there was no sex between them, as was originally planned. Instead, the sex is between Heuermann and the other man. At some point, the witness goes looking for her partner and is kind of upset that he doesn't emerge. He emerges, and finally, they leave, and kind of in a hurry. But when they leave, as they're leaving, the witness points out that she could see in the window looking out the girl that had come with them. And she says to her driver, her partner, "What are we doing? Are we taking her?" And the partner says, "Don't worry. They're just playing a game. She stays there. No problem." With that, the girl runs out of the house naked and is running in front of the garage. And now the witness says, "Hey, shouldn't we be taking her? Something's wrong here." And the driver tells her, "No, they're just playing a game. Leave it." And they leave. She never hears about the incident again. She distinctly remembers Heuermann. She also had intercourse with Heuermann that same day. And she kind of buries it, forgets about it, until on TV she sees the picture of Karen Vergata, and she recognizes her and said, "That's her," and she recognizes Rex Heuermann. And so she comes forward, and I meet her. I interview her at great length.
I'm not going to play this whole thing. It's when you're an investigator, and I preach this all the time when I was a professor, and I used to preach this to my students. Something we call, Mike, the first page of a report at the TPO,
right?
The time, place of occurrence. And if you can't give the time, the place, and the occurrence in an accurate time frame, how can you believe it? He's just claiming 1996, and this girl just got arrested. Okay, let's see if Karen Vergata, and do you even have the year? Do you even have the year, Mr. Ray? Because I saw the witness he put forth as the affiant on this, and to tell you the truth, I didn't buy a word she said. And first of all, Mike, we also know that IDing someone by seeing them on TV is not a legal identification in a criminal case. It's a bad identification. Oh yes, there he is. Of course, yeah, because they just told you his name and they just told you the Karen Vergata. I mean, to just say out of nowhere, "Oh, and that was Karen Vergata." I mean, I just don't buy it.
Billy, she's in her affidavit, and what he's promoting here is the fact that this woman remembers Karen Vergata. She didn't know the lady's name. She never knew the lady's name. She thinks it's about right around Valentine's Day, 1996, something like that, whatever it is. And here it is, 2023, when he's arrested. And she's saying, "Oh, yeah, I saw a picture of someone on the news of Karen Vergata. And that picture on the news of Karen Vergata, there was only one. And it looked like it was from like her grammar school days or maybe her freshman year in high school, so we're talking like perhaps the early to mid 1990s. So therefore, and you're going to make it from a high school picture or some sort of picture like that, a post picture, you're going to make an ID on someone you saw once at night driving over to a house in in Suffolk County, and you're going to come up with all of these facts about the case. Where is the detective? Surely you must know that detective. You must know his name, and that could be found out.
Well, he says he has the detective's name.
Okay,
but
good.
Look, if my point is, he's presenting all of these allegations as affiants. All right, let's let the detectives go check it out and see if it holds water. And if it doesn't, then let's dismiss it and get rid of it. Because it's slowing the case down, and it's extraneous noise. Reality with Krista Marie. Thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. Bill, side note, 27 years at NYPD. Does the name Bo Dietl mean anything to you? Asking for research. Bo Dietl was on the job before me. He only did 15 years on the job. He's a legend in his own mind. He has a private eye firm. He got into acting after it, but he only did 15 years on the NYPD. I think he broke his ankle or something. He had to get off the job. But He also he's a regular at Rayo's, that famous restaurant. But I knew a few guys that worked with him in street crime. They said he was a good cop, but he certainly was no legend. And he was a detective for a very short period of time because he only did 15 years on the job. But anyway, I hope I answered your question. Send this to Bo Dietl. He'll love that. So I want to play just a little bit of. We had another unbelievable profiler on our show, retired FBI agent Jim Clemente, who also wrote, along with Bobby Chacon, his buddy, his partner, for the TV show Criminal Minds. I'm going to play a little bit of this. I'm going to put Jim Clemente up on the screen. It's great to have this library of. Maybe I'll pull up one day the best of Dr. Debbie Goodman and play it on a show.
Thank you.
The white male part is basically all done on numbers. That is the most common. When you have white victims, there's a strong possibility that the offender is also going to be white. They're also the most they're the most prominent race in the area, and that's why we said white. But male was because these are clearly sex crimes and violent sex crimes, and that leans towards male offenders in most cases. But I actually said mid-30s, mid-40s, and if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly the age range where he was offending. In other words, these were sophisticated crimes. It's not something that we would generally see in a 20-year-old. It's something that generally the offender takes quite a bit of time, and these are compulsive crimes. In other words, he's fantasizing about these crimes. And so he's thinking about these and planning on and on and on. And as he goes forward with his crime, he gets more sophisticated. And this guy was able to actually do this repeatedly. At the time, they had found up to 10 or 11 bodies that could be attributed to him. And he used the same general area dumping ground. So we said he was from the area, that this wasn't just a coincidence that he happened on this area. He knew he could go there. He knew he'd have privacy, and he knew that he wouldn't stand out there. So he lived, worked, or played there. But we said that because of the bindings, the particular bindings that he used, that he was probably a control freak, and that would come out in his home life and his job. And to find out that he was an architect, which is filled with specificity and precision, that is exactly the kind of job that I would expect this guy to have. When I said he was married, I said that because generally somebody who he's in his 30s or 40s, a lot of times these offenders will have a family that they either control completely or that they use as a front or legitimacy. But the thing that really got me here was the fact that his crime seemed to have a seasonal nature. And what I opined at the time was that he was only offending at times when his wife and kids or his parents were away for the summer. And that's exactly what happened. His wife and kids would go out to Maryland and go out to, where was it? Iceland? I think she was originally from. And so, I don't know if it was a marriage where he sort of got a mail order bride. I'm not sure, but that wouldn't surprise me because I really think his family was a front for him. If you look at the way he kept his house, how much money he put into his guns, but how little he put into his house. The facade of his house was falling apart. His wife was using food stamps. I think his family, that's just an indication of how he actually looked at his family, what he actually felt about his family. And so the marriage and the fact that he only killed when they were on vacation was easy to predict from his behavior. I said that he was a sexual sadist, and that came from the fact that he used one of the victim's phones to call that victim's sister and taunt her and tell her what he did. And that is a sadistic act that helps him relive that fantasy. In other words, he wants to have as much of a ripple effect from these horrific acts that he committed as he possibly can. He wants to relive them as many times as he can. So I said, you will see this come out in his home life and in his crimes and in his work. I already said these are like fantasy-based crimes. This kind of offender has started thinking about this probably in late adolescence, and just he would do these basically intro crimes, these precursor crimes, like peeping Tom and maybe exposing himself, or breaking into homes and going into underwear drawers and things like that. Those kinds of crimes, I bet you we're going to find out that this guy has done a serious amount of them over time. I also said that the fact that he used burlap to not only wrap the victims but also bind some of them, this tells me that this is an unusual method of binding. And so I believed that there was at least some connection between him and burlap. I didn't know if he was getting it from being a gardener, or if he had some other thing at work. It turns out one thing that they didn't release was that it was camouflage burlap. And of course, that's used by hunters, duck hunters. They make a blind with the camouflage burlap with holes in it so they can stick their guns out and see through it. And that's where he got that. And of course, a number of his rifles were hunting rifles because he was a duck hunter. I said he would have a truck or a van to transport his victims. We thought it would be sort of on the higher end because he probably, when he's in it, he wants to look good. He wants his self-image to be good. And he's fairly forensically sophisticated. In other words, he did a fairly good job of hiding these victims long enough for them to decay completely. And that tells me he's got almost complete concealment. Sorry. He has almost permanent concealment, and it's at least long enough to get rid of much of the evidence. So because of the way these bodies were found, they don't know the actual cause of death, though they know the manner of death was homicide. So that helped him forensically. So we put his forensic sophistication at pretty high, and his criminal sophistication is fairly high. I think he's been committing crimes for a very long time, and he knows exactly how to avoid detection. For example, when we found out that after the Chevy Avalanche that he was driving was seen and reported to the cops, he transferred that car down to his brother in South Carolina. He didn't sell it. If he sold it, there would be a transaction record. What he did was he gave it to his brother, bought another one that's a slightly different color, so that people, if they saw him with it, they would say, oh, that's not the same color as the guy who saw it, so it must not be the same car. And they moved on. Well, it turns out because of some politics, and maybe because the head of that department was into some bad things himself at the time, that investigation didn't go anywhere at the time. But
Jim, if I could just interrupt you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for keeping on.
Professor. No, it's fascinating. Professor Mike Geary calls what you just described consciousness of guilt.
There you go.
And that, or premeditation, if you will.
Absolutely.
Because he's planning every move, but he knows he's guilty, and he's doing things to prevent himself from getting caught, i.e. the burner phones. Right. But then he did also some stupid things too, for a smart guy.
Well, what he didn't realize is that having the burner phone in the same vehicle with him as his real phone, just because he's using the burner phone doesn't mean that we can't track it down. Now, that's a lot of data to pull off a bunch of towers in such a metropolitan area. But
to me, fascinating. Probably the best profiler we had on our show. Just brilliant. FBI agent, I think, for 30 years. He's got another guy with a law degree. These guys just knock out law degrees like they're, like they're getting a pizza delivery, Wayne Randalls from the chat, thank you so much for the $7.99 super sticker. Very much appreciated. That was fascinating. And I love Dr. Joni Johnson. She's fantastic. Dr. Gary Bricado, amazing. But I think Jim Clemente, as far as the profile, all those predictions he was talking about, he made in 2010. All of them. So he predicted all of this stuff in 2010. It was almost perfect. There's almost nothing he missed about Rex Heuermann. And basically it's because he trained at Quantico in the behavioral analysis school for I don't know how many years, but he became one of the top FBI serial killer analysts. Dr. Debbie, one day we'll say that about you.
Thank you. But it was terrific. And again, a lot of solid, substantive information. And what we like to say, the totality of the case and of the individual and the levels and layers to peel back. But I think all that Agent Clementi said would again just reinforce, in my mind, about this case and this individual, that it is absolutely first-degree murder times however many victims we will ultimately end up having, and every step of the way it involved planning, premeditation, it was willful, it was with malice. And once in a while, Sergeant Bill, I'll be asked the question, well, Dr. Debbie, could somebody like a Rex Heuermann be legally insane? And I say no. Because just the reminder, for an individual to be insane, it would mean he or she does not know what they're doing, and they do not know that what they're doing is wrong. And I think we remove all of that from this case. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it was wrong. He went to great lengths. I like what the agent said about concealment, everything along the way he tried to conceal. And it just, again, solidifies that it's first-degree murder.
Absolutely. You know, Mike, this has been fascinating. You know, sometimes when I throw these shows together, as you know, I was away for 4 or 5 days in Denver, not to rub it into anybody, but I was away to visit my son. And we watched as other people covered this case, and we were salivating like we wanted to cover it. But, you know, you got to take some time off here and there. And then calling Dr. Debbie today with like 5 minutes before showtime, and she was ready to come on. And this show was really, really fascinating. And I want to thank both of you guys for coming on the show, because it's always good to have different perspectives. And I think the folks in the chat, they sort of like that too. And, you know, we can, you know, they can beat us up in the chat like they do sometimes. It's okay. As long as they're respectful, you know. And we like to answer questions in the chat too, if we know the answers to it. But everyone has a different perspective. But some things, it's not a perspective, it's fact and it's science, right? But anyway, Mike, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. People should realize that, you know, despite all the setbacks early on in the investigation under the former police commissioner years ago, once the task force was put together, with Rodney Harrison and A.D.H. Tierney, they within like 2 months or 3 months, they identified Rex Heuermann. They did a fabulous job. As smart and sophisticated as Rex was, he could never count or could not possibly foresee the DNA, the ability to the DNA technology to catch up and surpass anything that he could have ever thought possible back when he was doing the killings. And so we should be all grateful for that and all the technical ability that was brought to bear in these cases. And we should be very, very satisfied with that and thankful that we have that they were led really well and they're doing a fantastic job. And now, and somehow, even though it's very delayed by decades, at least some of the families are getting a little bit of justice for their loved ones who he's being charged with their death. So, you know, thumbs up to the task force. They have done a fabulous job.
Absolutely. Dr. Debbie Goodman from St. Thomas University, your final thoughts.
Yes, indeed. Well, as always, Sergeant Bill, just, you know, thanks to you, Professor Mike, the viewers. It's always an honor to join you for these intriguing conversations. And I'm just looking forward, let's call it, to the Z part. You know, I say A to Z, and I know there's a long way to go, but I really feel that the pathway toward this is looking very important and consistent with the evidence, with DNA, with the burner phones, and all that we have that's going to directly point to singularly one individual, this individual, Rex Heuermann, to take accountability, responsibility for our justice system, to react and respond in a way we hope for penalty purpose that's swift, severe, and certain. And it's always very, very traumatic and difficult for victims' families. You know, when we talk about victimology, of course, both of you as professors, you've discussed this with your students, and the viewers know, but there's really those three stages. It's the primary victimization. The person, in this regard, we refer to herself, who lost the life. And then the secondary piece, of course, the family members who are just forever, you know, broken and shattered by the horrendous loss of their loved one. And then there's tertiary, the rest of us, where we don't directly know the individuals, yet we too just feel such pain that this is what's happened. So I really have no doubt who we're looking at. We have the right person. I trust our system. I love our justice process. And I think we will see the outcome that's needed.
Well said, Dr. Debbie. Doc K, see, Bill, don't you think there was some law enforcement involved? You know, Doc K, I think that ever since the Gilgo Beach Task Force was formed, all the bad acts of the past can sort of be put, yeah, there were some bad things done and some things not done through omission and not doing what they were supposed to do that caused this case to languish much longer than it should have. It should have been solved many, many years ago, but there were many, many, many mistakes. One of them was not keeping the FBI on the case. One of them was not forming a task force. One of them was having one detective assigned to a serial killer. That's outrageous. Yeah. So Doc K, yeah, I agree with that. And I, at this point, point in the show, I always, and we did a little bit before, but I always like to mention, what this case is about right here. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartolome, and Megan Waterman. And just very, very recently, we added two more to this case, Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castillo. And we absolutely know that this case is about the victims, their families, and we pray for the souls of those victims and their families. And we hope that the Gilgo Beach Task Force can find more cases that, again, Rex Heuermann, I always have to say this because I get beat up when I don't. He's innocent till proven guilty, but there is tons and tons of evidence. And we've heard all the talking heads. We mentioned 3 serial killer experts just on this show tonight. Dr. Gary Bricado, Dr. Joni Johnson, and retired FBI agent Jim Clemente. And I also mentioned Bobby Chacon, who is a brilliant retired FBI agent in his own right. So we, as retired law enforcement, and Dr. Debbie as a criminologist, we have the pleasure to be on the same show as some of these people and learn from some of these people, not sitting in a classroom, but listening to what they have to say when they come on these shows. And I, for one, I'm thrilled with it. And I really have learned a lot through listening to these people. But guess what? They have the mutual respect for us too. Because you know something, as James Earl Jones used to say, we are the NYPD. I had to do that. Anyway, guys, I want to thank everyone that tuned in tonight. I want to especially thank Dr. Debbie Goodman, who flew in from South Florida to her living room. And I'd like to thank Professor Mike Geary, who lives about 15 minutes away from me, and he agreed to come on the show. So, folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, and God bless everyone.
Great.
Thank you.
One episode just ain't enough.